Welcome to Innovating Clinical Trials, the podcast designed for clinical research professionals eager to deepen their understanding of clinical trials through concise, insightful segments. Join your hosts, Liam Eves and Ted Trafford, as they uncover the core issues in clinical research, reflect on the industry, and challenge conventional wisdom.
Hey Ted, how are you?
Liam, I'm doing fantastic today.
Good. I was out playing. I've started playing golf again.
Okay.
Between me and you, assuming no one else is listening here, I managed
very few
people. I actually broke my hand about a few months ago playing the dangerous sport of golf by swinging too low and burying my club under about a foot of mud and snapping my one of my bones in my hand. So I'm back, but I'm back playing now. Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So life is good.
Excellent. Well, I want to talk today about the ministry of the silly walk.
I'm really interested to see how this is going to go and connect.
Well, like this week, the silliness has taken over. And so being from the UK, I hope you're familiar with Monty Python.
Oh, gosh, yes. I love Monty Python.
Yeah, John Cleese, Terry Gilliam, Michael Palin. Man,
amazing.
Like, just brilliant. So for those who don't know, Monty Python had a sketch comedy group / show called The Flying Circus. And this was back in the 1970s, 1980s. They made a bunch of movies. And people like John Cleese is just a master of physical comedy. And there's this sketch that they did about, honestly, 50 years ago called The Ministry of the Silly Walk. And have you ever seen it?
It's not something I've seen, but as soon as you said Monty Python, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's from Monty Python, because that seems a very Monty Python thing.
It is. So in the skit, the great John Cleese plays a bureaucrat at the Ministry of the Silly Walk. And the Ministry of the Silly Walk is a government agency where people go to obtain grants to develop their silly walk. So as the skit progresses, there's this man who enters John's office and wants to obtain a grant. And unfortunately, as the man performs his silly walk for John, John's character finds that this man's silly walk is rather lacking. So yet every time John Cleese moves in the skit, he just performs such an outrageous silly walk, and every move is more bizarre than the next. And it just has you in stitches. You just think, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And honestly, I think clinical trials have reached this state.
The silly walk.
The silly walks keep getting more and more bizarre. So, to be fair, sponsors, sites, CROs, vendors, everybody's equally guilty of spending an inordinate amount of time developing their silly walks. So, with sponsors, it's like the portal proliferation. It's training marathons, protocol gymnastics, CROs, email ping pong, process worship, site relationship amnesia, sites training procrastination, over optimistic enrollment forecast, principal investigator FOMO, vendors, top secret development, scrolling and clicking like you're playing Minecraft, help desk limbo. It just seems to be that we've reached the status of the bizarre. And what can be done to increase the impact of the silly walks? And I love to get your input on that.
So it's almost like everyone's doing such a silly walk now that it's just normal to walk like that way, and therefore it's no longer silly.
Yeah.
I think it's such a good point, and well done for connecting that. That was fantastic. You should be on radio, I think, Ted. I think my view is that I think that what happens is that and I think we may have spoken this about before, just from a principle perspective, is that we tend to always add things rather than take them away. And
Interesting.
so I wonder whether, like, I've not seen, like, when, whether it's technologies or process, I've only seen additions to the process. I've never seen like a subtraction.
That's brilliant. Yep.
And I think that my take from a 30,000-foot view is that we add things and then we optimize the things that we're adding, but never do we really truly look at if it needed to be added at all and optimized at all. And does it make more sense to strip things back? A protocol is a good example, right? You get the protocol and then someone goes, okay, here's the version of protocol. And you say, okay, cool. Where did this come from? Oh, well, we took it from something else. And you go, okay, let me go back to that person who did that protocol before. And say, okay, well, where do you get your protocol from? Is, oh, well, I took it from someone else. And, it just sort of carries on. And I wonder whether in our best efforts to do best practice, we are actually just replicating, and we always add on to those copies, right? It's copy, adapt, paste.
Yeah. And is there an opportunity to look at the process and say, okay, this is a challenge we're having, so we're going to add this to our process? But do we ever say, okay, this is something that it could be replaced or it could be streamlined? Because you're 100% right. That's how we function in well, I'm sure a lot of industries, where you look at a process, you identify a challenge, and you say, okay, we need to add this for clarity. But how often do we go back and look at the process as a whole and say, is this working? I love having conversations with new staff and telling them, hey, I need you to ask questions and ask why we do things, because we've been doing things a certain way for a long time. And just because we've been doing it doesn't mean it's the best way. And we need, especially a new perspective, to come in and say, this doesn't make sense to me, and explain why you're doing this. And I think that if the team leads are really sharp, they'll say, yeah, that's a really good question. Why are we doing this? And does this make sense for the reality that is now? Because the reality changes constantly. The tools that we have to work with in clinical trials, the environment, the people, everything's changing. But how often are we updating things to change with it?
Yeah, and I think there's that. It's like that. It's the underlying processes, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're a site or you're CRO or sponsor. I think that it's like really questioning, because I think that we see things that have always been done a certain way and just replicate that. And it makes total sense because it's easy. It's cognitively easier to do that, and to challenge everything that we see would be just such a headache, literally.
Right.
And I do wonder whether there's a question to say, which parts of the process do we really challenge and ask the question of, is this needed? But I think that we've got to do it from like a principled perspective. So it's got to be like, ultimately, when we think about research, it's that there's criteria that need to be met from like a regulatory perspective. There's criteria that need to be met from a scientific with the protocol. I think everything else is just layering on top of that to try and, for patients as an example, well, actually there's we've always, let's say for instance, we've always done the particular process of finding patients and screening them or pre-screening them to then go on the study. And we've always focused on the clinical and scientific questions that we're interested in around the protocol. But and that was so much easier to find those patients when there was we weren't competing for other drugs against other drugs, standard of care drugs or the competition for research. So that those patients were like relatively easy to find when you've got treatment naive patients. But then when all the market comes on and you've got lots of different drugs that can take, it's a different environment that you're operating in than what you was. So therefore, you can't just start saying, well, actually, what we're going to do is we're just going to do more of the same thing that worked 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I think it's about really updating your thinking to say, actually, what is going to be important in this? We are competing against standard of care, good clinical trials, patients that are no longer severe and so on and so forth. And it takes a different approach. And therefore, it might be better not to go for mass marketing advertising. It might actually be far better to look at higher volumes of pick sites or whatever it may be as a way of like identifying those patients and then referring them in. I think it's about being very conscious of the problem we're trying to solve and then trying to really strip back our thinking as much as we can.
I love that. I wanted to finish up with the analogy of the Monty Python Ministry of the Silly Walk. And in the skit, people spent their time perfecting ridiculous walks. And in clinical trials, we sometimes do the same thing, perfecting those processes that make our jobs harder rather than easier. And maybe it's time we retire some of these silly walks altogether. And I'm going to finish with a quote from this skit. So the guy that comes into John Cleese's office says, I have a silly walk and I'd like to obtain a government grant to develop it. And John Cleese responds, it's not particularly silly, is it? And the man responds and says, with government backing, I could make it very silly.
Amazing. Ted, I love it. Thank you, sir.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thanks, Liam.
Speak soon. Bye.
Yeah, have a great day.